Ben 10 is a franchise with over 200 episodes within its original continuity, each episode introducing many different characters as well as even different plot lines. But because of this, there's so many characters that get left behind depending on which era of the series we're talking about. Some characters feel like they became wasted potentials based on how they were used within the franchise. I think some characters should have been brought back more often than they actually were, while being able to give different stories and as well as different plot lines that other characters got wouldn't have worked well for them but could have worked well for these characters. Today I'm going to talk about all the wasted characters in Ben 10 in my opinion, as well as other things that could have fixed them or made them more interesting within the story. I'm not going to talk about characters from the reboot, because I feel like the reboot had a bunch of characters that all fit nicely within its own narrative and felt really self-contained. The first character I want to talk about today is Lieutenant Steele from the original series. I feel like Lieutenant Steele had a lot of potential to be a really interesting reoccurring character, as in the original series we didn't have many reoccurring characters that got their own story outside of Kevin 11. You can use Lieutenant Steele and his organization sect as a way to explain and world build more within the universe, saying they were the ones protecting the Earth after the Plumbers disbanded after the defeat of Vilgax. One of the biggest criticisms of the original series is how coincidental a lot of the adventures that the Tennysons ran into. If you kept bringing back Lieutenant Steele and Sect, you could have used them as a reason why they kept running into those adventures, having them be the reason that they had to be called over to do those things, as Sect could easily have found these problems and told the Tennysons about them and helped them with those adventures. Another character that could have added a lot to later on in the series and franchise as a whole would have been Myax from Secret of the Omnitrix. He felt like a really unique character when it came to being Azimuth's only apprentice that we knew at the time. Thanks to her being the same race as Vilgax, she could give context to how Vilgax is as his own species. She could also give him the opportunity to have the similar story to Doctor Doom, having him be a hero in his own planet/kingdom while everywhere else he's seen as a villain. She could have also played a really interesting foil to Albedo once he was introduced, as I think both characters could have showcased what it meant to be Azimuth's apprentice on which path they could have went down. I think she could have gave Albedo another character to bounce off of when it came to his hatred for Azimuth, also giving them both a reason to not like Azimuth, as at first Myax didn't really like Azimuth, but she could have shown that she'd grown over time to understand him and appreciate him as a mentor. The final character I will bring up from the original series will be Tetrax. I think he's one of the most, if not the most wasted character in the entire franchise, just based on how important he was early on within the series. Tetrax only has 3 main appearances within the entire franchise, 4 if you count the alternative version of himself within Omniverse. Tetrax has one of the most interesting backstories in the entire franchise, and I feel like he could have been fleshed out way more if he got to be used more often than he actually did. I think Tetrax could have worked way more if he was added to a lot more adventures, especially in Omniverse. I think Omniverse could have fleshed him out a lot more and even worked on the redemption arc that he had gotten early on within the story. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this video so far, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video around to your friends who may also enjoy it, as it helps the channel grow a lot. And now I'm going to introduce my guest, Dr. Wardy, who also has his own opinions on the most wasted characters in Ben 10.
Alright, first off, thank you for having me. As far as wasted characters go, I don't know if you call them wasted because they sort of worked well within the narrative in the episode Ready to Rumble, but I really liked Gator Boy and Porcupine. I can't remember if Porcupine's actually his name, but I just really liked them as a pairing, specifically Gator Boy. He always had this real Leatherhead or Killer Croc sort of vibe to him, but he's also so gentle. I have such a weakness for that sort of gentle giant trope. As far as, well, I'll count that as my 2. I don't necessarily think they are wasted, but I would have loved to see them come back in Alien Force, and especially Omniverse. I think that would have been so good. I also think it would have been super interesting to have them like mutate further, maybe. I know that they didn't really explain what they are, I guess, as far as Omniverse is concerned, they're Osmosians, but as far as the classic series is concerned, they're more mutants, but I would have loved to see them sort of mutate further, or even maybe be able to swap between forms. I know that's a bit silly, and I am taking the term wasted and sort of twisting it here. I don't think he is wasted again, so I apologise that none of these are really fully wasted characters, but I want to see more from Albedo. I feel like we got a really great few episodes in Omniverse with Albedo, at least post becoming a human Ben variant Albedo, but I just would have loved to see more from him and more from his sort of new Ultimatrix. I just think it was so interesting. I love the designs. We got so many new Ultimates from that, and I just really would have loved to see him explored further. As far as other wasted characters, just like a quick maybe shout out for actually wasted characters, would probably be all the sort of cloned characters you sort of see in Alien Force. How there's, well, you have Albedo, obviously, sort of a cloned Ben. You have Cooper, who's sort of, at least visually, a cloned Kevin. And then obviously Gwen's cousin Sunny, who is like a dark version of her. Anyway, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me again, Dr. Wardy. Shout out to him. His channel will be in the description below. Check out his stuff because he also does a lot of Ben 10 stuff and they're really good. Now let's move on to some Ultimate Alien and Alien Force characters I think were wasted overall. Rhiney was one of the most interesting characters introduced during the Alien Force era, as he was the only hybrid at first to accept Ben 10 for who he was. I feel like he was a really interesting character and could also add a lot more towards Ben's character later on within other series such as Omniverse, to showcase just why he became the hero of heroes later on, with his own compassion as well as understanding of other species. I think it would have been really interesting to see the hybrid be reintroduced during the Frogs of War arc and help the Tenetons fight against the Incursions. Having Rhiney come there and help Ben would have been a really good long-term story arc at giving Ben final closure to Rhiney's character and have them both help each other in a situation they needed, as Ben had helped Rhiney previously in another episode during the Alien Force era. The Brooders are also another very underrated and utilized group, as they never really got any real development outside of their introductory episodes. Even the arc that's supposed to be based around them was mostly used to introduce more lore around Kevin, and especially just make Kevin more of a tragic figure. A character like Pierce, who dies off screen, should have been a much bigger impact on the franchise, but he just dies off screen and no one ever mentions it again. He even only gets brought up one more time in the entire franchise in a flashback, where he doesn't even speak, if I remember correctly. I think he should have had a much bigger role within the entire franchise, as he should have been the reason why the Tenetons go after the Forever Knights, not just the fact that they were just taking down other alien species. I think the only character from Omniverse I would say really got wasted was he didn't even get introduced in Omniverse. He got introduced in the classic series, but more fleshed out in Omniverse would have been Kai Green's grandfather. So I think he could have had a really interesting dynamic with Rook. Wes Green could have been another mentor for Rook, as we never really got a full mentorship for Rook outside of Ben for maybe a couple episodes, if that, as Ben would always treated Rook more as an equal, but if Rook had another person to bounce off of, it would have added much more character dynamics, and also given us a new dynamic that we hadn't really seen in a really long time up to that point in Omniverse, once Wes Green was reintroduced into the franchise. All of these characters that were mentioned today could have really fleshed out the entire franchise if they were used correctly, or if better than the ways they were actually used, or were brought back a lot more than they actually were. I think Tetrax and Myax are the most missed opportunity characters out of all the people we mentioned today. Ben 10 is a franchise with a ton of characters, as we mentioned before. There's a lot of characters that we still didn't even mention on this list, so why don't you tell me in the comments who you think is the most wasted characters in the entire franchise. This has been your host, Middleman, and I'll see you next time.